Welcome back, everyone. What if one of the most overlooked coins in American history has been sitting in plain sight for decades, quietly holding details that most collectors completely miss, and certain authenticated examples have become surprisingly desirable to serious numismatists? Today, we are examining the Lincoln Memorial Cent, and what you discover might change the way you look at every penny you have ever held. First coin. In the vast and endlessly fascinating world of American numismatics, few coins have generated as much intrigue, debate, and collector obsession as the 1960 Lincoln Cent, a seemingly ordinary penny that hides an extraordinary secret within its design. Most people who have ever emptied their pockets or sifted through an old jar of coins have likely handled a Lincoln Cent without giving it a second thought, but the 1960 issue carries a distinction that separates it from millions of its counterparts in a way that only trained eyes can detect. That distinction lies in the date itself, which was struck in two distinctly different sizes, creating what collectors now refer to as the large date and small date varieties. What makes this discovery so compelling is that one of these varieties is dramatically rarer than the other, and authenticated examples in exceptional condition have commanded prices at auction that would astonish anyone who assumed a penny could never be worth more than 1 cent. Later, we will explore exactly what verified examples of this coin have sold for in the professional marketplace, what specific factors determine whether a particular specimen is worth a few dollars or several thousand, and why grading experts, auction houses, and seasoned collectors treat this humble cent with a level of seriousness usually reserved for far more glamorous coinage. To understand why the 1960 Lincoln Cent exists in two varieties, one must first look at the historical and economic landscape of the United States during that era. The year 1960 was a time of tremendous transition in America, marked by the election of John F. Kennedy, the escalating Cold War, and a booming post-war economy that relied heavily on small-denomination coinage for everyday commerce. The United States Mint was producing Lincoln Cents at an extraordinary pace to meet the demands of a growing population and an expanding consumer economy, with the Philadelphia and Denver mints together churning out well over 2 billion cents that year alone. The Lincoln Cent itself had undergone a significant redesign just 1 year earlier, in 1959, when the reverse was changed from the classic wheat ears design to the Lincoln Memorial, commemorating the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Frank Gasparro, the chief engraver of the United States Mint, designed the new reverse, while the obverse continued to feature the beloved Lincoln portrait originally created by sculptor Victor David Brenner in 1909. The sheer volume of production, combined with the pressures of maintaining die quality across billions of strikes, created an environment where subtle variations in the manufacturing process could and did occur, ultimately giving birth to the two-date varieties that would later captivate the collecting community. The technical differences between the large date and small date varieties are subtle but unmistakable once a collector knows what to look for, and understanding these distinctions is essential for anyone hoping to identify a potentially valuable specimen. On the large date variety, the numerals in the date are noticeably taller and bolder, with the 9 in particular extending higher than the other digits, giving the date a more prominent and elongated appearance. On the small date variety, all 4 numerals are noticeably shorter and more compact, with the top of the 9 aligning roughly level with the tops of the 1, 9, 6, and 0, creating a uniform height across the entire date. The small date is believed to have been produced when mint technicians used a different master die or a modified date punch, possibly in an effort to refine the appearance of the coin or as a result of die maintenance during the massive production run. Both the Philadelphia Mint, which produced coins without a mint mark, and the Denver Mint, which stamped a small d below the date, struck both varieties, meaning there are technically 4 distinct versions of the 1960 Lincoln Cent: the 1960 large date, the 1960 small date, the 1960D large date, and the 1960D small date. Among these, the 1960 small date from Philadelphia, and especially the 1960D small date, are the varieties that collectors pursue with the greatest intensity, as their populations are significantly smaller than their large date counterparts. The composition and physical characteristics of the 1960 Lincoln cent are consistent with the broader series of cents produced during that period, and these details matter greatly when it comes to authentication, grading, and long-term preservation. Each coin weighs approximately 3.11 grams and measures 19 millimeters in diameter, with a plain edge and a composition of 95% copper, with the remaining 5% consisting of tin and zinc, forming what numismatists refer to as a bronze alloy. This composition would remain in use until mid-1982, when the mint transitioned to a copper-plated zinc cent, making the 1960 issue part of what collectors call the copper cent era. The bronze alloy gives these coins their characteristic warm, reddish-brown coloration when freshly struck, though over time, and with exposure to circulation, handling, and environmental conditions, the surfaces tone and darken, shifting from brilliant red to reddish-brown and eventually to a full brown color. This color transformation plays a critical role in how grading services evaluate and classify these coins, as the Professional Coin Grading Service and the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation assign color designations of RD for full red, RB for reddish-brown, and BN for brown, with full red examples commanding the highest premiums in the marketplace. A 1960 small date or 1960D small date graded in mint state condition with a full red designation can be worth dramatically more than an identical grade with brown coloration, sometimes by a factor of 3 or 4, which is why proper storage and preservation from the moment of striking can have an enormous impact on a coin's eventual collector value. The strike quality and production characteristics of the 1960 Lincoln cent varieties further complicate the already challenging task of identifying and valuing these coins, particularly because the small date variety was produced under circumstances that remain somewhat debated among numismatic scholars. Some researchers believe the small date was an early production run that was quickly replaced by the large date when mint officials determined that the smaller numerals were less legible or less aesthetically consistent with the overall design, while others suggest that the small date may have been produced at a specific point in the production cycle when die wear or maintenance led to the use of a different date punch. Regardless of the exact cause, the small date varieties are notably scarcer than the large date in both mint locations, and this scarcity becomes even more pronounced in higher grades. The Philadelphia Mint produced approximately 586 million cents in 1960, while the Denver Mint produced roughly 1.6 billion, but only a small fraction of those totals represent the small date varieties, and an even smaller fraction survived in uncirculated condition with full mint red coloration. This is where the collector value story becomes particularly compelling, because while a circulated 1960 small date might be worth only a few dollars to a dealer, an authenticated 1960 small date, graded MS65RD, by a major grading service has sold at auction for approximately $1,200. And a 1960D small date in the same grade has realized prices in the range of $1,800 to $2,200, reflecting the significantly stronger demand for the Denver variety among advanced collectors. Grading standards for the 1960 Lincoln cent varieties follow the established Sheldon scale, which ranges from 1 to 70, and understanding how grading services evaluate these specific coins is crucial for anyone who believes they may have discovered a valuable specimen. In circulated grades, the coin's value remains modest, typically ranging from a few cents to perhaps $20 or $30 depending on the variety and condition, because the key numismatic value of this coin lies in its uncirculated, mint state examples. Coins graded MS63 and MS64 represent the entry level for serious collector interest, with 1960D small date specimens in these grades generally valued between $300 and $600, while MS-65 examples begin to enter the range where auction competition intensifies significantly. At the MS-66 RD level, a 1960D small date can command between $2,500 and $3,500, and at MS-67 RD, which represents an extraordinarily high level of preservation for a coin struck from bronze planchets in a high-volume production environment, authenticated examples have sold for approximately $3,800 to $4,200 at major auctions. These figures should be understood in context, however, because they represent coins that have been professionally authenticated, encapsulated, and graded by recognized services such as PCGS or NGC, and they reflect the condition rarity that emerges when a coin type produced in the hundreds of millions survives in a state of near perfection that perhaps only a handful of specimens can claim. Authentication and counterfeit awareness are especially important considerations for the 1960 Lincoln cent varieties, because the potential value of the small date has led to attempts at deception over the years. One of the most common forms of fakery involves artificially altering a large date sent to make it appear as a small date, typically through careful re-engraving or tooling of the numerals, a process that experienced numismatists can detect through magnification and examination of the mint luster and metal flow around the date area. Genuine small date specimens exhibit natural mint luster and consistent metal flow patterns that are extremely difficult to replicate through post-mint alteration, and professional grading services use high-powered microscopy and expert analysis to distinguish authentic specimens from altered or counterfeit examples. Another important consideration is the existence of genuine mint errors on 1960 Lincoln cents, such as off-center strikes, doubled dies, repunched mint marks on the Denver issues, and planchet errors, all of which can add significant premium value to an already collectible variety. A 1960D small date with a verified repunched mint mark, for example, could be worth substantially more than a standard small date in the same grade, and collectors who specialize in variety and error collecting actively seek out these combinations. For anyone who suspects they may have a valuable 1960 small date, the most prudent course of action is to submit the coin to a professional grading service for authentication and encapsulation, which not only verifies the variety but also protects the coin in a tamper-evident holder that is universally recognized in the numismatic marketplace. The long-term preservation and storage of any valuable 1960 Lincoln cent, regardless of variety or grade, is a subject that deserves serious attention from anyone who owns or intends to collect these coins, because improper storage can degrade a coin's condition and destroy thousands of dollars in value over a relatively short period. Copper and bronze coins are particularly susceptible to environmental damage, including spotting, tarnishing, and the development of unsightly green or black residues caused by exposure to moisture, acids, PVC from certain types of plastic holders, and even the natural oils and salts present on human skin. Collectors should never clean a potentially valuable cent, as any form of mechanical or chemical cleaning will leave detectable marks on the surface that immediately reduce the coin's grade and market value, often by more than half. The recommended approach for long-term storage involves placing authenticated and graded coins in their original slab holders and storing them in a cool, dry environment with stable temperature and humidity levels, ideally using archival quality materials and avoiding any storage containers that contain PVC or other reactive chemicals. For raw, ungraded coins that a collector suspects may be valuable, the safest practice is to handle them only by the edges, place them in inert, non-PVC flips or holders, and submit them to a grading service as soon as possible. The enduring appeal of the 1960 Lincoln cent varieties lies in the remarkable fact that a coin produced by the billions, handled by millions of Americans, and largely overlooked for decades, can still yield discoveries of genuine numismatic significance, and for those who take the time to learn the distinguishing features, understand the grading standards, and approach the hobby with patience and discipline. The 1960s small date remains one of the most accessible yet potentially rewarding treasures in all of American coin collecting. Next coin. There is a coin that millions of Americans have held in their hands without ever realizing that beneath its humble copper surface lies a story of presidential ambition, Cold War anxiety, and a quiet numismatic rarity that continues to surprise even seasoned collectors. The 1962 D. Lincoln Memorial Cent, struck at the Denver Mint during one of the most tense and consequential years in American history, appears at first glance to be one of the most ordinary coins ever produced by the United States government. Its mintage was enormous, its design was already 3 years old, and its face value is exactly 1 cent. Yet within the universe of professional coin collecting, this specific issue has developed a reputation that defies its everyday appearance, because the overwhelming majority of the more than 1.5 billion examples produced were released into circulation, worn down in pockets and cash registers, and ultimately lost to time. What survives in pristine, uncirculated condition with full original mint coloration represents a fraction of the original mintage, and it is within that tiny surviving population that the most remarkable and valuable examples exist. Later in this documentary, we will explore exactly what factors determine the collector value of this deceptively common coin, what authenticated examples in exceptional condition have sold for at professional auctions, and why grading experts and serious numismatists treat certain 1962D cents with a reverence that seems almost impossible for a coin worth 1 cent. The year 1962 was a moment of extraordinary tension and transformation in the United States, and the coins produced during that period were silent witnesses to events that shaped the modern world. President John F. Kennedy was navigating the country through the height of the Cold War, and in October of that year, the Cuban Missile Crisis brought the nation to the brink of nuclear confrontation with the Soviet Union, a 13-day standoff that would forever alter the American psyche and the trajectory of global politics. Domestically, the economy was robust and expanding, with gross domestic product growing steadily and consumer confidence fueling an unprecedented demand for everyday goods and services. That economic vitality translated directly into a massive need for circulating coinage, as Americans were spending more, earning more, and participating in commerce at levels that strained the capacity of the nation's mints. The Denver Mint, situated at the foot of the Rocky Mountains and operating as one of the primary production facilities for United States coinage, bore a significant portion of the responsibility for meeting this demand. The facility had been producing coins since 1906 and had developed a reputation for high-volume, efficient production, but the pressures of the early 1960s tested even its considerable capabilities. The 1962 D. Lincoln Memorial Cent was born into this environment of urgency and scale, a coin designed not for collectors, but for the daily transactions of a nation in the midst of a historic economic and geopolitical transformation. The design of the 1962 D cent reflects an artistic lineage that connects two of the most significant figures in American numismatic history, and understanding that lineage deepens the appreciation of what this coin represents. The obverse features the right-facing portrait of Abraham Lincoln, originally sculpted by Lithuanian-born artist Victor David Brenner in 1909 to commemorate the centennial of Lincoln's birth. Brenner's design was revolutionary for its time, as it was the first circulating American coin to bear the image of a real person rather than an allegorical figure such as Liberty, a decision that generated considerable controversy when it was first introduced, but ultimately became one of the most beloved and enduring designs in United States coinage. The reverse of the 1962 D cent features the Lincoln Memorial, designed by Frank Gasparo, who served as the chief engraver of the United States Mint from 1965 until his retirement in 1981. Gasparo's design replaced the iconic wheat ears reverse in 1959 as part of the sesquicentennial celebration of Lincoln's birth, and it depicted the neoclassical memorial that stands at the west end of the National Mall in Washington, D.C. The choice to feature the memorial was deeply symbolic, as it represented Lincoln's enduring presence in the national consciousness and served as a tribute to his legacy of preserving the Union during its most catastrophic conflict. The small D mint mark positioned beneath the date on the obverse identifies this coin as a product of the Denver Mint, a designation that carries significance for collectors because Denver minted cents of this era often exhibit different strike characteristics and luster patterns compared to their Philadelphia counterparts. From a technical standpoint, the 1962 D. Lincoln Memorial Cent conforms to the physical specifications that defined American 1-cent coinage throughout the Bronze Era, specifications that had remained largely unchanged since the introduction of the Lincoln cent in 1909. Each coin weighs approximately 3.11 grams and measures 19 millimeters in diameter, with a plain, readless edge that distinguishes it from higher denomination coins that feature reading or lettering on their edges. The composition consists of 95% copper, with the remaining 5% comprising a mixture of tin and zinc, producing what metallurgists and numismatists refer to as a bronze alloy. This alloy was selected for its durability, its resistance to corrosion under normal circulation conditions, and its warm, reddish-golden color that gave the cent its characteristic appearance when freshly struck. The production process began with the preparation of planchets, which were blank metal discs cut from long strips of rolled bronze alloy, cleaned, burnished, and fed into high-speed coin presses at the Denver facility. These presses, capable of striking hundreds of coins per minute, used paired dies engraved with the obverse and reverse designs to transform each blank planchet into a finished coin under tremendous pressure. The total mintage of the 1962 D cent was approximately 1,468,124,700, a figure that places it among the more heavily produced cents of the early 1960s and underscores the extraordinary scale of American coinage production during this period. Despite this massive output, the quality of individual strikes varied considerably depending on die wear, press calibration, planchet preparation, and the speed of production, all of which contribute to the relative scarcity of truly exceptional examples in the surviving population. Circulation history of the 1962 D cent is a story of mass distribution followed by gradual attrition, and this pattern is central to understanding why the coin has become collectible in ways that its original designers and mint officials never anticipated. Virtually, the entire mintage was released into general circulation through Federal Reserve channels, distributed to banks across the western United States and beyond, and used in everyday transactions for decades. Bronze cents from this era were workhorses of the American economy, passing through countless hands, sitting in cash drawers, tumbling through vending machines, and accumulating in jars and piggy banks in homes across the country. The vast majority of these coins experienced significant wear, with the highest points of the design, including Lincoln's cheekbone and the steps of the memorial on the reverse, showing friction and loss of detail within months of entering circulation. Over the decades, millions of these coins were lost, damaged through exposure to moisture and chemicals, or effectively destroyed through natural attrition. What this means for collectors today is that finding a 1962 D cent in circulated condition is trivially easy, as worn examples remain common in pocket change and coin jars, but locating an example that never entered circulation, that retains its full original mint luster and surface quality, is an entirely different challenge. The surviving high-grade population is remarkably thin, not because the coins were rare when produced, but because virtually none were saved in pristine condition at the time of issue, and those that did survive uncirculated often did so by accident rather than design. Professional grading standards for the 1962 D. Lincoln Memorial Cent follow the Sheldon scale, which assigns numerical grades from 1 to 70 based on the condition and visual quality of a coin. And understanding how this scale applies to bronze cents is essential for anyone seeking to evaluate a potentially valuable specimen. In circulated grades, which range from good 4 through about uncirculated 58, the 1962 D cent holds minimal collector value, typically worth only a few cents above face value, because these grades represent coins that have been used in commerce and have lost their original mint surfaces. The true numismatic interest begins at the mint state level, which encompasses coins graded MS-60 through MS-70 that have never been circulated and retain their original strike characteristics. Within the mint state range, grading services such as the Professional Coin Grading Service and the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation apply additional color designations that are critically important for bronze cents, classifying them as RD for full red, RB for reddish-brown, and BN for brown. A full red designation indicates that the coin has retained at least 85% of its original copper coloration, a remarkably difficult standard to meet for a coin produced more than 6 decades ago, because bronze naturally oxidizes and tones over time, even under ideal storage conditions. A 1962 D cent graded MS-65 RD represents an exceptionally well-preserved example and has sold at auction for approximately $1,200, while an MS-66 RD specimen, which exhibits even stronger strike quality and surface preservation, has realized prices in the range of $2,200 to $2,800, depending on the specific auction venue and the level of competition among bidders. The pursuit of even higher grades reveals the true condition rarity of the 1962 D cent, and this is where the coin transitions from an interesting collectible to a genuinely scarce numismatic item that commands serious attention from advanced collectors. At the MS-67 RD level, which demands near-perfect strike definition, unbroken mint luster, and virtually flawless surfaces free of contact marks, carbon spots, or other imperfections, the surviving population becomes extraordinarily small. Professional grading service population reports indicate that only a very limited number of 1962 D cents have achieved this grade with full red coloration, and authenticated examples in this category have sold at auction for approximately $3,500 to $4,200, figures that reflect the intense competition among specialists who seek to assemble the finest known sets of Lincoln Memorial cents. These prices should be understood in their proper context, as they apply exclusively to coins that have been professionally authenticated, graded, and encapsulated by recognized services, and they represent specimens that represent the absolute pinnacle of quality for this issue. It is essential to emphasize that the vast majority of 1962 D cents, even those that appear attractive to the untrained eye, will not meet these standards, and that professional grading, certification of authenticity, and assessment of condition by experts are the determining factors in whether a coin can achieve such values. No collector should assume that a raw, ungraded 1962 D cent found in circulation or inherited from a relative carries significant value without first obtaining professional evaluation, as the difference between a coin worth a few cents and one worth thousands of dollars often comes down to distinctions that are invisible to all but the most experienced numismatists operating under controlled lighting and magnification. Beyond the standard date and mint mark collectability, the 1962 D cent has also attracted interest from specialists who study die varieties and mint eras, areas of numismatics that can add significant value when genuine and properly documented. While the 1962 D is not associated with a single famous die variety in the way that the 1955 double die obverse or the 1960 small date cents are, the Lincoln Memorial series as a whole is rich with minor varieties including repunched mint marks, die cracks, die chips, and minor doubling that variety collectors actively pursue and catalog. A genuine repunched mint mark on a 1962 D cent, where the D was stamped slightly off-center and then restruck, can add a modest premium for variety specialists, though such premiums are typically far below the values commanded by major varieties on other dates. More significant value can attach to genuine mint errors, such as off-center strikes, broad strikes, or coins struck on incorrect planchets, though authenticated examples of such errors on 1962 D cents are uncommon, and each must be evaluated individually based on its specific characteristics and the degree of collector interest it generates. Counterfeit awareness is an important consideration for any potentially valuable Lincoln cent, as the relative simplicity of the design and the availability of genuine common date cents have led to instances of altered dates, added mint marks, and other forms of deception over the years. Collectors should be particularly cautious of any 1962 D cent offered as exceptionally rare or valuable without professional grading, and should rely on the authentication services of PCGS, NGC, or other recognized grading companies to verify both the genuineness and the condition of any specimen they intend to purchase or sell at significant value. For long-term preservation, any valuable 1962 D cent should be stored in its original grading slab or in archival quality, inert holders free of PVC, in a cool and dry environment with stable temperature and humidity, and should never be cleaned or handled on its surfaces, as even the slightest abrasion or chemical exposure can permanently reduce a coin's grade and market value. The 1962 D Lincoln Memorial Cent stands as a testament to the principle that in numismatics, as in so many fields, true rarity often hides not in low mintage figures, but in the extraordinary difficulty of finding perfection among the ordinary. And for those who understand this principle, this unassuming Denver minted penny remains one of the most quietly compelling coins in the entire Lincoln cent series. Next up, imagine holding a coin that was struck during one of the most turbulent and transformative years in American history, a coin so common that over 6 billion of them were produced, yet so carefully studied by serious collectors that certain authenticated examples have sold for prices that would seem impossible for a 1-cent piece. The 1964 Lincoln Memorial Cent looks identical to the pennies most Americans have passed over countless times without a second glance, and that is precisely what makes it so fascinating to a numismatic investigator. The untrained eye sees a simple copper coin with Abraham Lincoln's profile and a familiar memorial on the reverse, but an experienced collector knows that within that massive mintage lies a hidden hierarchy of quality, rarity, and value that separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. The date alone tells a story, the mint mark reveals an origin, and the surfaces hold secrets about how the coin was struck, how it was handled, and whether it has survived in a condition that collectors consider genuinely significant. As we examine this coin together, we will discover what seasoned numismatists look for first when they encounter a 1964 cent, what specific characteristics separate a coin worth a few cents from one worth thousands of dollars, and why authenticated examples in exceptional condition have achieved collector values that continue to surprise even the most experienced specialists in the field. The first thing any serious collector does when examining a 1964 Lincoln cent is turn the coin to catch the light at different angles, because the way light interacts with the surface tells an immediate story about the coin's history since it left the mint. A collector is looking for mint luster, that distinctive cartwheel-like flash of light that rotates across the surface as the coin is tilted, a quality that exists only on coins that have never been circulated and never been cleaned. If that luster is intact, unbroken, and flows naturally across the entire surface without interruption, the collector knows they may be looking at something special. The next step is to examine the date and the area beneath it, because the 1964 cent was produced at two different mint facilities, Philadelphia and Denver, and the presence or absence of a mint mark beneath the date determines which facility struck the coin. Philadelphia coins bear no mint mark, while Denver issues display a small D positioned directly below the date, and this distinction matters because the two mints produced coins with subtly different strike characteristics, luster patterns, and surface qualities that can affect collector value. The collector then examines the highest points of the design, focusing on Lincoln's cheekbone, the hair above his ear, and the details of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, particularly the columns and steps, because these areas are the first to show wear and the last to retain full detail when a coin has been well struck and well preserved. The historical context surrounding the 1964 Lincoln cent adds a layer of significance that elevates this coin beyond its technical specifications, because the year it was produced was one of the most consequential in 20th century American history. The nation was still reeling from the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in November 1963, and Lyndon B. Johnson had assumed the presidency with an ambitious agenda that would soon produce the Civil Rights Act of 1964, one of the most far-reaching pieces of social legislation in American history. The country was also deepening its involvement in Vietnam, experiencing a rising tide of social change and undergoing an economic expansion that placed extraordinary demands on the nation's coinage system. The demand for cents in particular had reached unprecedented levels, driven by population growth, the expansion of consumer commerce, and a growing shortage of silver coins that was beginning to strain the entire monetary system. The United States Mint responded by producing cents at a pace that dwarfed any previous year, with the Philadelphia facility striking approximately 2.6 billion cents and the Denver facility producing an astonishing 3.8 billion, bringing the combined total to well over 6 billion pieces. This enormous mintage was a direct response to the commercial needs of a nation in the midst of historic transformation, and it means that the 1964 cent is among the most heavily produced coins in American history, a fact that makes the existence of truly rare, high-grade examples all the more remarkable. The physical specifications of the 1964 Lincoln cent place it firmly within the Bronze Era of American 1-cent coinage, a period that began in 1909 and would continue until the transition to copper-plated zinc in 1982. Each coin weighs approximately 3.11 grams and measures 19 millimeters in diameter, with a plain, smooth edge that contains no reading, lettering, or decorative elements. The composition consists of 95% copper balanced with 5% tin and zinc, creating a bronze alloy that gives the coin its characteristic warm, reddish-golden hue when freshly struck. This alloy was chosen for its durability, its resistance to corrosion under normal conditions, and its pleasing aesthetic qualities, but it also possesses a tendency to oxidize and tone over time, shifting from brilliant red to reddish-brown and eventually to a deep chocolate brown as the copper reacts with environmental elements. The obverse design, featuring the right-facing portrait of Abraham Lincoln, was created by sculptor and engraver Victor David Brenner, who based his work on a plaque of Lincoln he had produced several years earlier. Brenner's design was groundbreaking when introduced in 1909, as it was the first circulating American coin to feature the image of a real historical figure rather than an allegorical representation, and it sparked considerable debate at the time about the propriety of placing a president's likeness on everyday coinage. The reverse, featuring the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., was designed by Frank Gasparo, who would later become the chief engraver of the United States Mint, and it replaced the original wheat ears reverse in 1959 as part of the sesquicentennial celebration of Lincoln's birth. Gasparo's depiction of the memorial was both an artistic and symbolic choice, representing Lincoln's permanent place in the American national memory and the physical monument that stands as a testament to his legacy of preserving the Union. The manufacturing process that produced the 1964 Lincoln cent was a marvel of industrial-scale precision, but it also introduced variables that directly affect the collectability of individual specimens today. Production began with the creation of master dies from engraved hubs, a process that transferred the design from the original artistic models to steel dies capable of striking thousands of coins before wearing out. Planchets, the blank metal discs that would become coins, were cut from long strips of rolled bronze alloy, cleaned, and fed into high-speed presses that struck each planchet between opposing dies at tremendous pressure, transforming the blank disc into a finished coin in a fraction of a second. The speed and volume of production at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints in 1964 meant that die wear was a constant factor, and as dies deteriorated over the course of a production run, the quality of individual strikes declined, resulting in coins with softer details, weaker lettering, and less defined design elements. This is why experienced collectors pay such close attention to strike quality when evaluating a 1964 cent, because a sharply struck coin with full detail on Lincoln's hair, the lettering, and the memorial columns represents a specimen that was struck early in the die's life, before wear began to soften the impression. Such coins are considerably scarcer than the average production output, and when combined with full original mint luster and pristine surfaces, they represent the pinnacle of quality that collectors seek and that grading services reward with their highest assessments. The color classification of a 1964 Lincoln cent is one of the most critical factors in determining its collector value, and understanding this system requires an appreciation for how bronze ages and reacts to its environment over time. Professional grading services, such as the Professional Coin Grading Service and the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, assign color designations to uncirculated bronze cents based on the percentage of original red coloration that remains visible on the coin's surfaces. A coin that retains at least 85% of its original copper-red color receives the RD, or red, designation, which is the most desirable and valuable classification. Coins that have partially toned, showing a mixture of red and brown surfaces, receive the RB, or reddish-brown, designation, while coins that have fully toned to brown receive the BN designation. For a coin produced in 1964, achieving and maintaining a full red designation over more than 6 decades is an extraordinary feat that requires the coin to have been struck, handled with extraordinary care, and stored in conditions that minimized exposure to oxygen, moisture, and temperature fluctuations. This is why a 1964 cent graded MS65RD can sell at auction for approximately $1,100 to $1,400, while the same coin in the same numerical grade, but with a brown designation, might be worth only $20 or $30, because the color designation represents a dramatic difference in originality, eye appeal, and surviving population that collectors are willing to pay significant premiums to acquire. As we move deeper into the investigation of what makes certain 1964 cents genuinely valuable, the role of professional grading becomes paramount, because the distinctions that separate a coin worth a few dollars from one worth thousands are often invisible to the naked eye and require expert evaluation under controlled conditions. The Sheldon grading scale, which assigns numerical grades from 1 to 70, provides the framework, but for the 1964 cent, the meaningful action begins at the mint state level, which encompasses grades from MS60 through MS70 and represents coins that have never been circulated. At MS63 and MS64, a full red 1964 cent holds modest collector value, typically in the range of $50 to $200, because these grades, while uncirculated, show visible contact marks and surface imperfections that prevent them from achieving higher classification. At MS65RD, the coin begins to enter the territory where serious collectors take notice, and at MS66RD, the population thins dramatically, with authenticated examples selling for approximately $1,800 to $2,500, depending on which mint produced them and the specific quality of the strike and surfaces. At MS67RD, which demands near-perfect surfaces, unbroken luster, and exceptional eye appeal, the 1964 cent becomes a genuinely rare coin, with population reports from major grading services showing only a small number of certified examples at this level. Authenticated 1964 cents, graded MS67 RD have sold at auction for approximately $3,200 to $3,800, and the Denver variety in this grade has achieved prices approaching $4,000 in competitive bidding environments where multiple specialists were pursuing the same specimen for registry set collections. These values belong exclusively to coins that have been professionally certified, and they should never be interpreted as representative of the typical 1964 cent, which remains one of the most common coins in American circulation. The final layer of our investigation involves the specialized areas of die varieties, mint errors, authentication, and preservation, each of which can dramatically affect the value and collectability of a 1964 Lincoln cent. While the 1964 issue is not associated with a single famous variety on the scale of the 1955 double die obverse, the Lincoln Memorial Series is systematically studied by variety collectors who catalog minor repunched mint marks, die cracks, die chips, and instances of minor doubling that can add premium value for specialists. A genuine repunched mint mark on a 1964 D cent, where the D was stamped multiple times in slightly different positions, can carry a modest premium among variety collectors, though such premiums are typically far below the values associated with major varieties on other dates. More significant value can attach to genuine mint errors, such as off-center strikes, broad strikes, coins struck on incorrect planchets, or lamination errors where the bronze alloy separates or peels away from the surface, though authenticated examples of such errors on 1964 cents are uncommon, and each must be evaluated individually. Counterfeit awareness is essential because the potential value of high-grade examples has led to instances of altered dates, artificially added mint marks, and coins that have been chemically treated or artificially retoned to mimic natural coloration. Professional grading services use microscopy, metallurgical analysis, and expert examination to detect such alterations, and collectors should never purchase a raw, ungraded 1964 cent represented as exceptionally rare or valuable without independent professional authentication. For preservation, any valuable 1964 cent should be stored in archival quality, inert holders free of PVC, in a cool and dry environment with stable temperature and humidity, and should never be cleaned, polished, or handled on its surfaces, as even the slightest abrasion or chemical exposure can permanently reduce its grade and destroy thousands of dollars in collector value. The 1964 Lincoln Memorial cent, when examined with the care and knowledge of a serious numismatist, reveals itself as far more than a common penny, because within its billions of siblings lies a tiny population of extraordinary specimens that represent the convergence of historical significance, artistic achievement, industrial production, and the relentless pursuit of perfection that defines the collector's craft. Last coin. There is a coin that sat in the pockets, piggy banks, and cash registers of nearly every American household during the latter half of the 20th century, a coin so ubiquitous that most people who handled it never paused to consider what they were actually holding. The 1965 Lincoln Memorial cent appears at first glance to be one of the most unremarkable objects ever produced by the United States government. A small copper disc worth exactly 1 cent, stamped with a familiar presidential portrait and a monument that every schoolchild can identify. Yet within the professional numismatic community, this specific year represents a pivotal turning point in American coinage history, a moment when the very system by which the nation produced its money was fundamentally restructured, and the 1965 cent became a quiet witness to changes that would reshape collecting forever. What most people do not realize is that this coin carries a distinguishing feature, or more precisely, the absence of one, that separates it from nearly every other Lincoln cent in the series and links it directly to a national crisis in coinage that few Americans today even remember occurred. Later in this documentary, we will examine the specific factors that determine why certain authenticated examples of this deceptively ordinary cent have become desirable to serious collectors, what verified market results reveal about the value of exceptional specimens, and why the story behind this particular year makes it far more significant than its face value suggests. To understand the 1965 Lincoln cent, one must first understand the extraordinary upheaval in American coinage that began in the early 1960s and reached a breaking point in 1965. The United States was experiencing a severe coin shortage, driven by a combination of rising silver prices, aggressive hoarding by both speculators and ordinary citizens, and an expanding economy that demanded more circulating coinage than the mints could supply. Silver coins, particularly dimes and quarters, were being pulled from circulation at an alarming rate because their metal content had become worth more than their face value, a phenomenon that threatened the very functioning of everyday commerce. Congress responded with the Coinage Act of 1965, signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson on July 23 of that year, which authorized the removal of silver from dimes and quarters and the reduction of silver content in half dollars from 90% to 40%. The act also granted the Treasury Department extraordinary authority to manage coinage production during the crisis, and one of the most visible consequences was the suspension of mint marks on all coins produced from 1965 through 1967. The official justification was that removing mint marks would discourage collectors and hoarders from pulling coins from circulation, thereby keeping more coinage in the hands of the public and the commercial system. This means that the 1965 Lincoln cent, regardless of which facility actually struck it, bears no mint mark beneath the date, a feature that distinguishes it from cents produced before 1965 and after 1967, and that serves as a permanent physical reminder of one of the most consequential legislative interventions in American monetary history. The broader historical landscape of 1965 provides essential context for understanding why this coin exists in the form it does, and why it carries a significance that transcends its modest denomination. The nation was simultaneously navigating the escalation of the Vietnam War, with the first large-scale deployment of American combat troops beginning that year, and the transformative social legislation of Johnson's Great Society, including the creation of Medicare and Medicaid, the passage of the Voting Rights Act, and the Immigration and Nationality Act that fundamentally reshaped American immigration policy. The economy was growing rapidly, with gross domestic product expanding at an annual rate of over 6%, but inflationary pressures were building, and the rising cost of commodities, including silver, was creating distortions throughout the monetary system. The demand for cents was particularly intense, as the expanding population and the proliferation of vending machines, parking meters, and coin-operated devices created a constant need for small-denomination coinage that strained the production capacity of the Philadelphia Mint, which was the primary facility responsible for cent production during this period. The total mintage of the 1965 Lincoln cent is reported as approximately 1,499,340,300, a figure that approaches 1.5 billion pieces, and reflects the extraordinary industrial effort required to keep the nation supplied with everyday coinage during a period of unprecedented demand and systemic disruption. The physical and artistic characteristics of the 1965 cent connect it to a design legacy that spans more than half a century of American coinage, and examining these details closely reveals the craftsmanship and intention that underlie even the most utilitarian objects the government produces. The obverse features the right-facing portrait of Abraham Lincoln, originally sculpted by Victor David Brenner in 1909, a design that has remained in continuous use longer than any other in American coinage history. Brenner's Lincoln was modeled after a photograph taken by Anthony Berger in 1864, and it captures the president in a state of quiet resolve, his gaze directed forward with an expression that conveys both the weight of leadership and a sense of moral purpose. The reverse bears the Lincoln Memorial as designed by Frank Gasparro, who created the image in 1959 to replace the original wheat ears reverse and to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. Gasparro's depiction of the memorial is architecturally precise, showing the neoclassical structure with its 36 Doric columns representing the states of the Union at the time of Lincoln's death, and it carries a deep symbolic resonance, placing Lincoln within the physical and spiritual landscape of the nation's capital. The coin weighs approximately 3.11 grams, measures 19 millimeters in diameter, and has a plain, smooth edge without reading or lettering. Its composition remains the bronze alloy of 95% copper with 5% tin and zinc that had been standard since 1909, giving the coin its characteristic warm coloration and a density that feels substantial in the hand despite its small size. The production methods employed in striking the 1965 cent reflect both the technological capabilities of the era and the extraordinary pressures under which the mint was operating, and these factors directly influence the quality and collectability of surviving specimens. Planchets were prepared from rolled strips of bronze alloy, cut to size, cleaned, and fed into high-speed presses that struck each blank between paired dies at pressures sufficient to transfer every detail of the engraved design into the metal surface. The volume of production required to meet demand meant that dies were used far beyond their optimal lifespan, resulting in a significant variation in strike quality across the mintage, with early strikes from fresh dies exhibiting sharp, crisp details and late strikes from worn dies showing softness in the lettering, the hair details, and particularly the columns and steps of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. An additional and critically important dimension of 1965 cent production involves the special mint set, a product introduced that year as a replacement for the traditional proof set, which had been discontinued as part of the Treasury's emergency coinage measures. The special mint set was produced using modified techniques that resulted in coins with a distinctive finish, sharper than regular business strikes, but without the full mirror fields and frosted devices of traditional proofs. These SMS coins were struck at the Philadelphia Mint using specially selected planchets and carefully prepared dies, and they represent the highest quality examples of 1965 cent production, making them the primary focus of advanced collectors seeking exceptional specimens from this year. The grading standards applied to the 1965 Lincoln cent follow the Sheldon scale, and understanding how professional grading services evaluate these coins is essential for anyone who wishes to assess the potential collector value of a specimen. For regular business strike cents, the meaningful collector interest begins at the mint state level, with coins graded MS-60 and above representing specimens that have never entered circulation and retain their original surfaces. The color designation system, which classifies uncirculated bronze cents as RD for full red, RB for reddish-brown, and BN for brown, plays a decisive role in determining value, with full red examples commanding the highest premiums because they represent coins that have retained their original copper brilliance for over 6 decades without significant oxidation. A 1965 business strike cent graded MS-65 RD holds modest value, typically in the range of $30 to $60, while an MS-66 RD example can sell for approximately $150 to $250, reflecting the increasing scarcity of coins at higher grade levels. The population thins dramatically at MS-67 RD, where authenticated examples have sold at auction for approximately $1,000 to $1,400, and at MS-68 RD, which represents an almost unimaginable level of preservation for a coin produced in the billions, the population becomes vanishingly small. With verified examples having achieved auction prices in the range of $2,800 to $3,600 in competitive bidding among specialists seeking the finest known specimens for advanced registry sets. These figures apply exclusively to coins that have been professionally authenticated, graded, and encapsulated by recognized services, such as the Professional Coin Grading Service or the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, and they should never be interpreted as representative of the typical 1965 cent, which remains common in circulated condition and modest in value at most uncirculated grades. The special mint set cents of 1965 represent a distinct and particularly intriguing area of collector interest, because their production method, finish characteristics, and surviving population differ significantly from regular business strikes, and understanding these differences is essential for a complete evaluation of this year's coinage. SMS cents exhibit a distinctive surface quality that falls between the brilliant, mirror-like finish of a traditional proof and the satiny, cartwheeling luster of a standard business strike, with many examples showing a subtle, semi-reflective quality that experienced collectors can identify through careful examination. The grading of SMS coins uses a separate designation system, typically labeled as SB or SMS, and the population of high-grade examples is considerably smaller than that of business strikes, because the SMS production was limited to sets sold directly to collectors rather than released into general circulation. A 1965 SMS cent graded SB66 by a major grading service typically holds a value of approximately $40 to $80, while an SB67 example can command approximately $200 to $400, reflecting the increasing difficulty of finding specimens with pristine surfaces and strong eye appeal. At the SB68 level, the population becomes remarkably thin, and authenticated examples have sold at auction for approximately $1,500 to $2,200, while the rarest SB69 examples, which represent the absolute summit of quality for this issue, have achieved prices approaching $3,200 in specialized auctions where advanced collectors compete for the finest known specimens. Collectors should be aware that distinguishing between a high-grade business strike and an SMS cent requires expertise, as the surface finishes can appear similar to the untrained eye, and professional authentication is essential for anyone who suspects they may possess a valuable SMS example. The final dimensions of our investigation encompass die varieties, mint errors, authentication, and preservation, each of which can dramatically influence the value and collectability of a 1965 Lincoln cent. While the 1965 issue is not associated with a single famous die variety on the scale of the 1955 double die obverse, the Lincoln Memorial Series is systematically studied by variety collectors who have catalogued minor double dies, die cracks, die chips, and other production irregularities that can carry premium value among specialists. Genuine mint errors, such as off-center strikes, broad strikes, coins struck on incorrect planchets such as dime or foreign coin blanks, and lamination errors where the bronze surface peels or separates, do exist for the 1965 cent, and authenticated examples of significant errors can sell for approximately $1,800 to $2,500, depending on the type, severity, and visual appeal of the error. Counterfeit detection is a serious consideration for any potentially valuable 1965 cent, because the absence of a mint mark means that one common form of deception, the addition of a false mint mark to a common coin, is not applicable, but other forms of fakery remain relevant, including altered dates, chemically treated surfaces designed to mimic original red coloration, and artificially retoned coins intended to disguise cleaning or surface damage. Professional grading services employ microscopy, metallurgical analysis, and expert visual examination to detect such alterations, and collectors should never purchase a raw, ungraded 1965 cent represented as exceptionally rare or valuable without independent professional authentication. For long-term preservation, any valuable 1965 cent should be stored in archival quality, inert holders free of PVC, in a cool, dry environment with stable temperature and humidity, and should never be cleaned, polished, or handled on its surfaces, as even the slightest abrasive contact or chemical exposure can permanently reduce a coin's grade and destroy thousands of dollars in collector value. The 1965 Lincoln Memorial Cent, born during a crisis that reshaped American coinage, stands as a quiet monument to a year when the nation's monetary system was reinvented under pressure. And for those who learn to read its surfaces with a trained eye, it reveals a story of historical consequence, industrial ambition, and the enduring human fascination with finding the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. And that search, as any seasoned numismatist will tell you, is only just beginning.